Welcome everyone to the 2023 inaugural edition of Startup Dudes. I'm Todd.
I'm Bill, and welcome.
He's my dad. So on our startup journeys, we've been talking about various ways that you can start up your own company. You can learn from companies that we've started up. And we thought a really interesting story to talk about was one in which my father, Bill, started up a gift division under what was then the 7th largest toy company in the world, Tomy Toys, which is a Japanese company. So how did that all come about?
Well, it's a good story in the world of startups, which is the point of our being with you today, is startups. This was a startup that I got involved with back in 1984. I was recruited to be the VP GM for Tomy Toys in USA for the purpose of starting a gift division. Tomy, as Todd says, was the 7th largest toy company in America at the time, back in '84, and they wanted to move into the gift industry.
Why do they want to do that?
That was the point. Well, I think they originally felt that their toy product would be could see a further market into the gift industry, but they really didn't know the mechanisms. I knew it almost immediately, but anybody in the gift industry that wanted Tomy toys, like for example, they had little wind-ups, a very famous Tomy wind-up,
little robots.
Yeah, the little things, you wind them up, and they thought that would be a good, cute novelty for the gift industry, and it was. But the gift industry would just buy it from the toy company. You know, they wouldn't need
a whole different division,
a whole different company to do that. So, but that was one of their original thoughts, and I think another one of their original thoughts was that they wanted to see us import more from Japan. That business would flow through Tomy in Tokyo. That wasn't the case either. You know, as I got into it, I found out what was practical and what wasn't practical. You didn't need a gift industry, a whole new infrastructure, like you said, Todd, just to sell Tomy toys that they can go buy from their local toy rep. So but I was charged with getting Tomy into the gift industry.
That's a completely different target market, right? It's a whole different audience than toys, and that's probably why they went outside to find that guy, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I definitely wanted to accomplish that for them. I felt there was two segments of business for the toy industry. One was novelty, and one was collectibles. Now, collectibles were still kind of important and kind of hot back in '84. That changed a few years later when the collectible industry's kind of imploded.
It's collapsed.
Yeah, and you know, when it went with the baseball, remember the baseball cards exploded, and a lot of the artistic collectibles exploded. But it was still hot at the time, so I thought there was two pieces of business. So I formed two entities. One was called Presence of California, PRESENTS of California. That was going to be the novelty company. And then a collectible company was going to be called the Heirloom Tradition. So we worked up the logos and went through the legal process to get those set up for Tomy. And I thought that pulling it out of Japan was not a good idea because the prices in Japan kept increasing. And so I was thinking more of Taiwan and Korea at the time, and some China. So my whole strategy was a little bit different than what they imagined in their boardroom. But anyhow, I wanted the product to I wanted to minimize our risk. So I thought that the product should be based upon brands that people were familiar with for decades and decades and decades. I didn't want to come up with stuff that was entirely new and have more of a high-risk startup situation. So I brought in a number of licenses because I had experience, as you know, on licensing back from my Disney days. So I brought in some licenses for Presence of California, which was the novelty company, and some licenses for the heirloom tradition, which was the collectible industry.
So we skipped a little bit. I wanted to learn a little bit more about why they hired you. I'm sure there were other candidates. Was it the Disney background that they liked so much, or? I mean, it seems that would be a pretty sought after position.
I came out of the gift industry at that time. Well, certainly a big chunk of Disney's consumer products is gift
related,
and also toys. So they knew that, and the Disney brand name helped, no question about it. And I came most immediately out of the gift industry as vice president, general manager of United China and Glass Company, based in New Orleans. And they were was kind of a famous, as far as gift companies concerned. It was
one of the oldest in America. Right?
Yeah, it was established in 1851, and it was the first gift importer that was authorized to import from Japan by MacArthur. He personally had to sign off on that after World War II. So it was kind of, at least in our little world, kind of famous. And the location for United China and Glass and Company, the headquarters in Japan, was in Nagoya. So during the process of being VP General Manager of United China and Glass Company's Royal Orleans division, I spent a lot of time going back and forth to Japan. So anyhow, they knew about me.
So so now you're going to start deciding what kinds of products to make and market. It almost doesn't matter that Tomy was the parent company, right? I mean, consumers don't really care.
No.
So that's one of the reasons why you just came up with two new names. Was it beneficial to almost separate it from a toy company?
Yeah, you don't want to call it Tomy Gift Division.
Or Tomy Toys of Gifts.
Tomy Toys for Gifts. So yeah, we all thought that they should have a couple of new names that were kind of cool. We hoped that would be cool.
I remember growing up and seeing Tomy toy commercials on television all the time. They must have spent a lot of money on commercials, Dad.
Yeah,
I saw a lot of that. So
they were well known for some of the first robots, like you said earlier.
Yeah, I know. Star Yours. I remember I had those too. Little kind of Shogun Warrior type wind-up characters. I'm sure you can find them on.
They were a great company. They still are a great company. I really enjoyed the experience. They put me reporting to the board of directors in Tokyo through the CFO in America. The Tomy Toys CFO in America, his name was John Vanderholst, and I reported to the board of directors in Tokyo through John. So John was my man, my guy, my contact, and we had a lot of fun. John really enjoyed being part of building, a gift company. He became one of my 3 mentors in my life.
What were the first sort of things that you had to do? What did you do for the first year of this startup?
Well, the product development, and that gets, I touched a little bit on the licenses. What were they, I'll just give you a few examples without talking about it at great length. But Presence of California was to be kind of a novelty company. I got licenses from Tom and Jerry, the little cartoon characters. And
was that Hanna-Barbera?
No, that was Universal at the time. And the point was to do plush and dolls based upon Tom and Jerry. And then the Popeye family, we were able to get a license for dolls and plush, and that was the whole family. Popeye and Brutus and Jeep, the little character. Olive oil, and that was the type of thing. And then there was a Love Is comic strip out of the LA Times. I think LA Times owned Love Is, I believe. and I thought we could do some mugs and figurines and things. So that was the type of thing we did in Presence of
So you did
California.
plush and hard lines.
Uh-huh.
What was the product ratio or mix? Was it 50-50
In Presence of California,
between plush and...
probably 50-50, something like that. And then the heirloom tradition also went after some license agreements. There's a Louis Icart, I think I've got that right, was the father of Art Deco. And I thought we could do some beautiful...
From an artistic point of view. He was an artist.
Uh-huh. He's the guy that founded the art, kind of credited for, let's say, commercializing and making it famous, Art Deco, Louis Icart. And so I got a license from them out of Paris. They'd never done any, I don't think. The family didn't give me the impression they'd ever done a license.
Was this something they were skeptical of or excited about?
A little bit. I think they were excited, to see figurines based upon his paintings and his artwork. So if you go even today into eBay and you type in Louis Icart figurines, you're going to see some pretty beautiful...
Yeah, that was probably the most beautiful figurine I've ever seen.
Yeah, they're...
Back when figurines were all the rage and people collected those, they were hand sculpted at some point, right?
Yeah, they were
Japanese
sculpted
artists?
Japanese, that's right. And they were magnificent. I mean, if you get a chance and you're interested, go take a look at eBay, Louis Icart, ICART figurines, and you'll see some examples of it. But that was one of the license agreements that was the foundation for the heirloom tradition. Then the next kind of set of decisions I had to make was how are you going to get this distributed? Rather than house salesmen, I wanted to be more conservative for cost purposes, so we used reps. And we went to trade shows, and we had a showroom in next, in the toy building in Irvine, and Long Beach or Irvine. I think it was Long Beach, and and then. There's an interesting anecdote that you might get a kick out of when you're at a trade show and you're looking for reps, which I was. You'll have reps approach you at your booth and say, "Hey, I'd like to represent this line.
I'm the best rep there is."
I'm the best rep, and I say, "Well, what areas do you cover?" And they would say, "Oh, the 13 Western states." That was like a automatic tape recorder that came out of Western sales reps. Says, "I represent the 13 Western states."
And I'm sure they go to Utah all the time, right?
Yeah. So my famous, not famous, only famous to me, was well, who are your customers? And I remember one guy said JCPenney. I said, "Well, what proportion of your total business does JCPenney make up?" Oh, he says, "A lot." I said, "Well, how much is a lot?" 90%. So I said, "Well, your territory is JCPenney rather than 13 Western states."
So based upon customer rather than territory.
That's just something that might help you all when you do some thinking about territoriality, territories.
And who you're giving rights to.
Who you're giving rights to. People will give you what they've had experience giving. Don't expect them to do what they've never done before. So they could grow into it, but likely they won't.
And why would you give rights to someone that it's not the right person? Like, let's say the 13 Western States guys goes to Utah once every 2 years. That's probably not the guy to have representing your products in Utah. You'd find a guy or a company that's there all the time.
Might look in Salt Lake. Start there.
Right.
So anyhow, that was kind of
so
a funny
for
little
product
story.
development first, then distribution, and then what was sort of the next? What did you spend most of your time doing after that?
Well, the product development took pretty much
continues. That's
yeah,
ongoing.
It's ongoing, but it took a big part of year number one. We started to plan for the introduction of the line. We booked the Pierre Hotel in New York City. Black tie. Invited everybody we could figure. Any big buyers, sales reps.
Was that your decision to do Pierre?
I think I did that, if I remember, in consultation with John Vanderholst.
So you wanted to make a big impression.
Yeah, and the Japanese, they wanted to do big, and they wanted to do bold, and they wanted to do
it very right.
Very reputable. So, and we had some of the Japanese owners, and executive officers at that dinner, the National Sales Kickoff dinner at the Pierre Hotel, and it was really magnificent. Really
it's one of the
beautiful.
finest hotels in the world.
Yeah, it's really, really beautiful, very impressive. And we had, I still remember, we had the hotel artwork, the picture of the artwork done in pencil as the opening of the invitation to come to see Presence of California in the heirloom tradition.
You still have those?
I think I have one.
So, looking back, were there any things that you wish you'd have done differently?
Well, I can tell you a couple things that I'm really happy we did. One, I'm happy that we did not rely on Japan at that time, back in 1984, to be the primary export company. And I'll tell you why in a minute. It would have been a disaster to do that. As I mentioned earlier, we relied on Taiwan and Korea and China. That became something that was really, really important. I think I'm glad that we got into the licensing business as we did, because that probably saved us 5 years.
Because you can hit the ground running right away.
I
with
mean,
brands that were already
you want to
recognized.
build a brand, take you 50 years, or you want to have one in 1 year?
And then you just pay them a royalty.
You pay them a royalty. We'll talk about licensing more and more, over the upcoming episodes of Startup Dudes. But I'll just tell you kind of an interesting story on how it ended up. In 1987, 6 of the 7 countries in the G7 pact decided that they needed to revalue the exchange rate between Japan and America, and that doomed Tomy toys, the Tomy.
Just with a stroke of a pen.
Yeah, and because all of a sudden, remembering all of their product was coming out of Japan, right? So they couldn't diversify or spread it, and overnight all those prices coming out of Japan for the toys became too expensive, and the toy buyers in America wouldn't have any of it. Most of the other toy companies that Tomy Toys was competing with was not relying on Japan. So overnight, Tomy Toys told me, we're going to close. And what are you going to do? That was their question. I said, well, I'm not relying on Japan for importation, so it's not what the G7 did doesn't affect Taiwan, didn't affect Korea, China, Hong Kong. So I was able to spin off. I didn't have to close the toy company, but able to spin it off because it was very viable. And I also found out during the process of the spin-off for the gift company how important the licenses were with respect to valuation of the gift company. I mean, they really wanted those licenses, probably as much as they wanted,
for sure, because they were instantly in business.
I mean, they could start anybody could start a gift company. If you want to, just go out and do it. But why would they want mine? Why would they? But they did, and they said to me that we wanted primarily because of your license agreements. So the strategy that we put in place in the very beginning allowed us to be successful even at the very end.
We should talk in a future episode also about unwinding a company. It's something that happens a lot, right? What do you do if you've got something, like you said, that's viable, but it, the circumstances have changed that might require you to go out on your own or find a buyer? So do you remember how much sales you were doing at the peak with those companies?
It was in the millions.
Yeah.
But remember now, it started in 84 and G7 came out in 87, so we were very early days, in the evolution of a company. But only, the first year you're pretty much in pre-sales.
Right. So there weren't, it took you a year and a half before you probably saw it.
Yeah, so you were looking at a year and a half, of beating the bushes and developing sales. But it was a great experience. It was a beautiful product. You can still see it on eBay. But we hope that there's some lessons there for you and some things that might get you thinking about what you might want to do from our stories.
A couple things I take away from that. I had not heard all of that, so that was interesting to me. Number one, that there's real value in licensing other brands for your products and services. it can really give you credibility right out of the gate. Number two, how geopolitics can really change things quickly. I mean, you never know, right? If what things would have looked like had that not happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then number three, that you might be able to continue with what you've done and all that hard work you put in with in a new evolution with a new company. I think Hamilton Gifts bought that company, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bought those companies.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, thank you for that. That was very interesting. Appreciate that. So go online right now, everyone, and look up Louis Icard figurines, and you'll see what we're talking about. I mean, I think those things were like $100 back in the 80s, weren't they? They were really expensive. Now they're like 40. Because the figurine industry, nothing against the figurines, by the way, they're beautiful.
Yeah, they haven't changed.
It's just the figurine market is, I mean, the people that collected those honestly are just, they're not around as much as they once were. So, also take a look at the sign we have back here. We're pretty proud to say that this is going to be our new home for our videos. We got a lot of feedback that the quality of the sound and audio was better in my truck. So we're not trying to be cheap or anything like that, but it just worked out that it's very convenient. I hope you agree, and please give us some comments in the bottom and subscribe, and we'll look forward to another episode soon. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Bye-bye.